Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for listening to me once again. I just want to begin by saying this is a recording of a speech that I gave this past week on Shabbat. However, I recorded it after Shabbat, not on Shabbat itself, in Kunkletown, Pennsylvania. So I just want to thank Rabbi Weiss once again, the rabbi over there, for allowing me to go and come speak, and for hosting me to come speak at his synagogue over there. I just want to begin by discussing an idea, and that came up in the Parsha several weeks ago. And that is the idea of the verse that says, Haran Olah, which the literal translation means a rays of light, beams of light. Many misunderstand it means horns, which is where the age-old myth that Jews have horns comes from. In fact, many of the Christians, even till today, many people never met a Jew in their life, when the first thing they ask a Jew when they meet him is, where are your horns? But, either way, the verse over there talks about that Moses had rays of light shining from his face. Now, we're all familiar with the question, where did this come from? How did he get these rays of light shining off his face? So, the Midrash tells us, over there, that's because when Moses went up to Mount Sinai, he went up to go and God wrote the Torah scroll. And after he wrote it, something very interesting, there was a little bit of extra ink. The extra ink got sprinkled on his forehead, and from then on, he always had a shine to his face. The question is very simple. On that, how is it that if God is the one writing the Torah, does God not know how much ink you're going to need? Of course he knows. So we're going to leave this for now. We're not going to discuss it. It's not the purpose of what we're talking about today. However, I just want to throw that out for people to think about. Well, what exactly is this idea of extra ink to shine in the face? Now I want to say over a similar custom. Now when a baby is young and when he first starts learning Chumash in school, first starts learning the Torah in school, one of the things they do is they go and they put a Chumash by his head. Now again, we don't really, most people have the custom nowadays. Many of the early and later commentators, such as, I believe it's the Ramah, run by Moses Isserlis, and I believe the Maram. Again, don't quote me on that. I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head. I don't remember which one. But on the second day, we don't have this custom anymore. Also, but many of the various commentators say we don't have this custom anymore. It used to be they used to put something by the head of the baby, by the kid who was just beginning to learn the Chumash. And what's the reason for this? They tell us the reason is that now he should be privileged to learn and to fulfill all that's written inside. Okay, very nice. That's the reason, that's the custom, and maybe that's where the custom comes from this idea of Moses putting leftover ink on his forehead, once another place on by the head, and hope that maybe it'll get further. However, let's go back to our topic a little more. We have a very interesting question over here. You know, we start teaching the children Parsha Vayikra. That's the custom of many the Hasidic and also Orthodox communities. Why don't we begin teaching them from the beginning of the Torah, from the beginning of the Chumash? Why don't we start from Parshat Bereshit, which is right in the beginning? Why do we wait till Parshat Vayikra, smack in the middle, the third book out of 5, and that's where we teach them from? Doesn't it seem a little strange, a weird place to begin? The answer is very simple. It's because the entire book of Vayikra, the entire book is going to talk about two ideas, really. Well, really one idea, which branches out into something else, and that is the idea of the Holy Temple and the customs and the laws pertaining to the Holy Temple. Therefore, and it talks about the sacrifices also. Therefore, it's all about purity, the levels of spiritual purity that one can reach. And therefore, a little kid, a young kid, doesn't yet know what it's he doesn't know that he has levels of purity, and he's on a high level. And because he's on a higher level of purity, because he doesn't know what impurity is, therefore, we begin by teaching him about the other things having to do with purity. Okay, that's when we get to it. Now let's put this on to the side for just a minute, but don't worry, we'll come back to this again, this idea, so don't completely forget it yet. And let's move on to the idea of Pesach. In the traditional text of the Seder, there is a very weird verse that comes up in the middle, a weird phrase. It says, whoever doesn't say these three things on the night of Pesach, on the night of Passover, he does not fulfill the obligation, he doesn't fulfill the mitzvah. What are the three things? Pesach referring to the carbon, the sacrifice of the Pesach of the lamb they used to bring. Matzah, the unleavened bread that tastes, looks, and feels like crunchy cardboard. And Mara, the bitter herb of bitterness. What's the significance of these three things? That these are the make it or break it. You say it, you're suddenly, you fulfill the commandment, you fulfill the mitzvah, amazing. You don't say these things, and you're done. Why are these three things the make it or break it about the night of Pesach? Doesn't that seem weird? Maybe I would assume it's other things. Maybe, we clean our house. Many people have a custom, to get rid of the chametz. We don't eat the chametz. Or there are many other rituals that we do on the Seder night. Maybe, we have the Seder plate. Maybe we have the white. A lot of the custom in the Hasidic communities and in the Orthodox communities even, they wear white. Now, Hasidic communities are more into, they wear head to toe white. The Orthodox communities, the men wear the kittel, which is a white garb that really they dress in once one is deceased. They dress them in to bury them. But once again, we have these customs of dressing in white. Why don't we discuss that? Why is the make it or break it, the sacrifice, the unleavened bread, and the bitter herbs? Doesn't it seem a little strange? And what I'm going to tell you now is really one of the fundamental foundations of what the holiday of Pesach is really all about. A life-changing idea. Now, let's begin with the Pesach. The Karban Pesach obviously refers to that time at the temple. When the Jewish nation is holding where they should, we have our temple, we can bring the sacrifices. But it's a time that we no longer have. So therefore we have to look at the Mara, where we are now. We're stuck in exile and diaspora, suffering through bitterness, one thing after another thing, the anti-Semitism, and all the problems that the world is faced with. That's the Mara. The question is, what's the matzah? What's this unleavened bread? The matzah, and how does it fall in? And this is the idea. You ever go to a matzah bakery, specifically a hand matzah bakery, you will find something very interesting. First of all, they have to be done baking all the matzahs in under 18 minutes. Now, how does it work? Let me describe it to you. I was just at matzah bakeries this past week, and let me describe to you how it works by a matzah bakery. So, you come in, there's the guy in charge of the flour, there's the guy in charge of the water. Both the flour and the water have to stay separate the entire time. Then, there's a person who sits there, kneading the dough, mixing the dough. Then he gives it to another person, who breaks up the dough to hand out to different people. Then, it goes to the table, starts going down a table, where the first people make it to shape it into like a round circle. They pass it on to the next person who starts rolling it out. We'll pass it to the next person who rolls it thinner. To the next person who rolls it thinner. To the next person who makes the end. To the next person who goes and makes the holes in it. To the next person who goes and puts it into the oven. Who brings it to the oven, and the person who puts it into the oven. The person takes it out of the oven. And then after it's out of the oven, the person who checks it. It's a whole process. There's so much to do. And it's only possible to come about when you work together. When you work be'achdot, as they say in Hebrew. As one unit, working all together in peace. And that's the idea of the matzah. The matzah refers to coming together as one nation, as one people, and working together as a team. Teamwork. Something very interesting. Going back to really Parshat Noach, right in the beginning, right after the story of Noah and Noah, after the flood, the great flood, there's another story over there that we find in that same parsha, and that's the story of the Dar HaFlaga, as it's called. The story of the people who decide they're going to build a big tower, the great tower of Babylon. I think it was Babylon. But the great big tower to go to rebel against God, and they're going to defeat him, they're going to wage war on him, and with their tower, they will be able to fight him. Pretty silly saying that God is all present everywhere at the same time, but still, they believe they could do it, so why protest? But they got together and they started building. Now you would think, simple, I think most people would assume, that you go to rebel against God, a person rebels against the king, first thing he's killed. Yet we don't find that they're killed. Instead, the Torah tells us, instead of them being killed, he goes and he makes them, they all speak different languages. And then eventually they end up getting into fights. Doesn't it seem a little strange that this is the punishment? They're rebelling against God, and what? We're going to change the languages. Okay, you know what? I'm not going to ask questions, but really maybe there's a deeper meaning behind it. And that's what we'll now discuss. That these people, yeah, they went to fight against God, but there was something else they had to them, and that was they worked together as one unit in peace. And that is the beauty of coming together. The beauty of Achdut. That God said, yeah, you're coming to rebel against me. However, since you're working together, I will not be the one to go kill you, and I will not get you in trouble for it. You know, we find this idea of Achdut in many places. This is not a thing unique to over here, but let's go through another interesting thing that we find, and that is the custom of counting the Omer, the Sfirat HaOmer. When you count the Sfirat HaOmer, we count 49 days. And what do we do then? We count the Omer, and when we count the Omer, 49 days, amazing. Now many people take on various laws of mourning during the Omer time. And what's the reason for this? So many of us are familiar with the idea because Rabbi Akiva's disciples, students, he was one of the big Mishnaic era sages, the biggest of the big. To the extent that when Moses went up to Mount Sinai, he asked, what's going to be the future of this Torah? So God went and he showed Rabbi Akiva teaching his 20,000 Talmidim, and showing him teaching thousands and thousands and thousands of students, of disciples, and wow, blown away, didn't know what to do with himself. He said, why do you give me the Torah to me? You have such a person, and you give the Torah to me instead of him? But that's the way that it was done. Either way, his disciples were not respecting one another properly. So God went and killed them out, until there were just 5 remaining. And all the Torah that we have nowadays comes from those 5. But that's not important. What's important for now is that there were 5 disciples, 5 students remaining, and the rest were killed because they didn't treat one another with respect. Once again, this is our idea again, that we have to come together, ve'achdut. We have to join together as one nation, work together. And that's going to help us. You know, the second temple, and in fact the first temple also, the reason the temples were destroyed had to do with the fact that we were not working with Achdut. In fact, the Talmud and Tractate Gittin, through several pages over there, several portfolio discusses what exactly was the cause. And it says there was story after story of different fights that broke out. So you know why it is that we have this Pesach where we have to eat the maror, the bitter herb, and then we're stuck in an exile? It's because we're not coming together b'achdut. And it's because of the achdut by Sira, where we have the achdut, the lack of achdut causes that we now need to reach the higher levels of purity, and that's what we're working for in that time. Which brings us back to the kid. You know, kids, when they get into a fight with someone, they say, I'm never talking to you again, right? Every kid jumps on, I'm never talking to you again. And every adult, when they say that, small fight, they don't speak for years. But the kid, I'm never talking to you again, yet 10 minutes later he's back playing with them. Why? Because a kid with his purity just wants to go to have a good time, to have fun. But the adult, it's all about myself. I'm a selfish person, and all I care about is myself. And therefore, because all he cares about is himself, what happens? You know, he gets into a small fight with someone, and that's it. He's done. A kid gets into a fight with someone. No, we're going to work back up. And that's, again, the purity of the kid. So as we approach the Pesach holiday, what we have to remember and take upon ourselves is that we shall strive to work on our achdut, to work together, so that we too could reach a higher level of purity. And in this merit, we can be privileged to have the rebuilding and the building of the third temple in our times very shortly. Thank you. and have a great holiday.